Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name's Ash, but you can call me Hooby, and this is Lotus, whom you can barely see, and this is my May wrap-up and June TBR. I almost said April wrap-up and May TBR, that would be interesting. Okay, it has been a rather small reading month for me this month, at least in terms of finished books, which isn't a problem for me. Like, I'm fine with that. Just because I finished that many books in the first week of November last year doesn't mean anything. At my wrap-up last month and my TBR for this month, I said about how I had 2 audiobooks coming off of hold from a library and 1 ebook also coming off hold from the library. So I'm fairly certain I said about all 3 of them because I did and I was aware of it. All of them have come off hold. One of them was going to be in June, and that was The Martian, but that came early, as did the other one, The Great Alone. And the first one that I read this month, it was Not Quite Dead Yet. Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson, I believe, is quite the story, and I've been waiting for it on hold for months. I can't remember right now how long it was, but it was months. Just believe me, it was. In fact, I think I have a screenshot somewhere saying how long it was, so if so, I will put it on the screen here and you can see that it was months. But it was last year sometime, and it came off, I believe, on the 6th of May, because that is when I read it. Just in one day, just... Not Quite Dead Yet is a story about someone who essentially is going to die in 7 days. She is aware of this due to this medical thing, and she has to work out who has killed her. And it's a lot of fun. I have seen some reviews that say that if you've read lots of Holly Jackson, you can really see what's going to happen because it goes quite formulaic. I'm not sure if I've pronounced that correctly. Which I've also heard about Freida McFadden and all sorts of thriller writers, so it's nothing new. But it was my first Holly Jackson and I loved it. There were lots of different strings being pulled that you could follow, and I think they all had a nice end, that if I remember correctly. There weren't any left over. Well, not really. Now, last month's video, I said that I was going to try my hand at some paperbacks. I phrased that really weirdly, because it was literally checking whether my hands could take them. And I did that with the Darkwood series by Gabby Hutchinson Crouch. I really love this. It's quite easy to open and hold open, and the first book is the longest one, which isn't really that common in series. Normally they get bigger as they go along, but it got smaller as they went along. Not massively, but a little bit. You know, this is the first, second, third. This series is a sort of twisted fairy tale type thing, so it follows twins Hansel and Gretel. They're living in a small village by the Darkwood. Darkwood is a place where you should never ever enter because that's where witches are. Magic is completely banned, and there's this whole group called the Hunters who... I think they're called the Hunters. But, yeah. And a hunter comes to their village because they have sensed a witch there. How, we don't really get told for a while, but they know there is witchcraft there, and they assume it is Gretel, so Gretel has to run into the Darkwood to escape, where she finds some other witches. I say other witches. She isn't a witch, but she is a girl who does maths and all that sort of stuff, which people deem as witchcraft in these books. And the story just continues on from there, and it's wrapped up really nicely in the 3 books, I think. There is one thing that ended... In the last book, how something ended I didn't like, but it was one snippet and all these massive things, and it's just sort of like, I want like a novella about that, basically, and I don't think it will ever happen. But it's just sort of, maybe there's fan fiction somewhere to explore that. I really can't say what it is without so many spoilers, so... But there's something that's at the end of this one that if you've read it you'll know. They're called Darkwood, Such Big Teeth and Glass Coffin. And as I'm reading along, I'm noticing different things on the cover and what it means and stuff, which I think is a really nice touch, because it's just sort of like, oh, these are just like little pretty things, and then I'm reading along like, oh, that's referencing that, oh, that's referencing that, but it's just such a small thing, as you see on, oh my gosh, I've just noticed something I didn't even notice before. I love these, in case you can't tell. I love a bit of a like reworked fairy tale, and this is very much that. There's all the like classic European fairy tales are in these books, I think. Pretty much in some way or another, some bigger pieces than others. The funny thing is, other than these books because they are fantasy comedy, the funny thing is, I've put them in the wrong order. No, the funny thing is that my prediction at the end of last month's video was that the ones I was least likely to read were the paperbacks, because I didn't think I'd necessarily be able to. What makes it even funnier is that there were 3 cat books on my list, and I initially said that these are the ones that I'd be least likely to read, and then corrected myself to the paperbacks. The ones that I think I'm least likely to read are the cat books, just because they're physical, but actually paperback books. And then the cat books, yeah. Ones I'm most likely to read are Divergent, and then obviously Not Quite Dead Yet, because that's coming off hold. And The Great Alone, I guess I'll listen to, but that might end up being June that I finish it. So, yeah. Check back in a month to see whether I'm right about that. But I read not a single one of these. To be clear, it's this one and 2 other ones that are on my bookcase that I haven't bothered to get down. But I've probably inserted a clip here from last month's video, so you've seen them anyway. Other than those 4 books, I have only finished one other book, which was The Martian by Andy Weir. I had the audiobook from my library on this. That was the only option available. Yes, I adored Project Hail Mary. If you even liked Project Hail Mary, you will like The Martian, almost certainly. It's a little bit more sciencey. I mean, it goes into the science a little bit more, apparently, from someone who'd read Project Hail Mary more recently compared, like, to me before reading The Martian. They'd read it, like, in March, I think. And I read Project Hail Mary last year sometime, August, I think, maybe. The Martian, for anyone who doesn't know, is about an astronaut who essentially gets stranded on Mars. It starts off by him saying, "So I didn't die on that day that everyone thought I died." They took an emergency, like, going away. I can't think what that's called right now. I'll put the text on the screen for what it is, but gosh. They had an emergency exit. And they thought that he was no longer alive, so he ended up stranded on Mars. It was the same sort of human that's in Project Hail Mary, and it also had similar ways of doing stuff. I've said that in a really weird way, but I just suddenly realised that what I was going to say could be deemed a bit of a spoiler, and I avoid spoilers as much as possible. The audiobook that I listened to, there are 2 versions. There's one by R.C. Bray, I think, narrated by, that a friend of mine listened to that version and loved it. I've seen reviews of people saying that they hate that version. I had the Will Wheaton version, which I loved. It started off where I was like, I can just picture Will Wheaton, but shortly after, it was fine. He did different voices for different characters and stuff in a way that good narrators do, but not all narrators do. So that was really good as well. I think he worked with the comedic timing well and had the emotion behind it, which you would expect from an actor such as Will. One small thing that I really loved about it, which isn't really a spoiler, it's within the first chapter, and it's not really an event, it's a thing, is that you know how astronauts, like NASA names things after Greek deities? So there's like the Apollo mission, for instance. They named the missions to Mars after Ares, which, for those of you who don't know, Mars is the name for the Roman god of war, and Ares is the Greek counterpart. So they fully was just like, we're sending the god of war to the god of war, and it was just such a nice little of realism in the sci-fi, I guess. So yeah, those are the only 5 that I finished this month, but I have been reading 2 other ones. So I'm still doing the buddy read with Divergent. The person that I'm reading it with hasn't had as much time this month to read, so we're like 70% through. I think it's actually 69%. Going on in June, I will continue to read that with that person, and I've got a second buddy read of Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly either. That is so I'm not that far into it. I think I'm like 3 or 4 chapters into it currently. I'm not sure how many chapters there are in total. In fact, let me check what percentage through I am in it. I am 24% through Brave New World. And Brave New World, for those who don't know, is like the origin of dystopia. I could be wrong, there could be earlier ones, but it predates 1984 that people consider like the beginning of the dystopia franchise genre. And an Animal Farm, obviously, by something like 30 years, 20 years, something like that. It's just the stuff that's in it, the science that's in it is so real to some stuff that has happened since, and it's just, you know how people say about how Black Mirror is like predicting the future, but Black Mirror is only like 2 or 3 years behind, so it's very clearly obvious that things are going in this direction. Nothing against the creators of Black Mirror, obviously, but this was like 50 years ahead or more of some of these things. And yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, we can't do stuff like it's done here, but I feel like if science had continued on in that direction, then that probably would be the case, or very similar. It wouldn't necessarily work in exactly the same way as it does in that, but I do think that if people had wanted to go in that direction, then it probably would have done. Similar-ish to how in Back to the Future had, which is now the past, had all sorts of things that we don't have, but it didn't have something like a mobile phone, which is where like tech just went off. All our tech development went into stuff like phones, which is not something that was really conceived of that much then, so automatically think, oh, so science has boomed this much in this time, it will continue to boom like that. And it has, but in a different way. It's sort of like that, in that if technology had continued in that direction, we'd probably be pretty close to that, being able to do that. I don't know if I made that make sense at all, but Brave New World is so far reminding me of one of the stories in Out There Screaming. So if you've read that and enjoyed that, then I do think you'll enjoy this. But as I said, I'm only 24% of the way through so far. It is definitely a more adult book. Like, I don't expect there to be spice in it because of when it was written, but I do think it's got quite adult themes. No. And the last thing I have been reading but haven't finished is The End of Magic by Mark Stay. Long-term watchers of my channel might recognise the name Mark Stay because one of his books has been on my TBR videos for many months and just stopped in about March or something when I'm like, I can't really open books now. I've got The Crowfolk to read, The Crowfolk by Mark Stay. I also have this that I've been meaning to read for a long time. Entering this list for like the 5th month in a row is The Crowfolk by Mark Stay. Now, this has been on my TBR for months, but this month it's actually not going on my TBR because it's a paperback, and I've just said about how paperbacks are more difficult for me to read at the moment, so no, that's not going on there. But in order to read Brave New World, I got Kobo Plus, and The End of Magic is available on Kobo Plus, so I am reading a book I have the physical copy of on my Kobo, which is a slightly weird experience, but I'd kept lying in bed looking up at them and thinking, okay, so the other series feels out of reach. That series is so much bigger, that's definitely out of reach. And now I'm 71% through. So, you know, we live how we can, and it's alright. I am really enjoying the end of Magic so far. I'm going to go into some detail on it in a video that I think is coming out next week, but it might have come out last week. So if you're interested, then maybe you want to watch that, or maybe you've already watched that, but it is essentially a sort of post-apocalyptic type thing when the apocalypse is that magic has ended. That makes it sound more boring than it is, I think. I mean, I've said that before, like, I'm making this sound boring, and people are like, no, you're not. And I'm like, okay, well, it's more exciting than how I'm saying it, though, so I don't know. If you think that sounds fun, it's probably more fun. So my plans for June, obviously, are continuing to read Divergent, hopefully finish it, because I'm quite a way through. Continue reading Brave New World, might finish that, and finish The End of Magic. Probably read the 2 sequels as well, because they are both on Kobo Plus as well. One of which I actually don't have the physical copy of, because I bought the physical copies. Actually, I don't think I bought them. Someone bought them for me in October, and the last one came out in March. And it was sold out at the show in May. So, you know, apparently the series is good because he's sold out of them. I don't actually have a lot on my plans because I'm planning on recording a reading vlog where I use a colour wheel to decide what I read, which isn't anything new. Loads of other people have done it as well. But I just don't have anything on my list because I'm going to be doing that. Not I don't have anything. I've got The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. I've got the audiobook for that. I'm trying to finish that this week, but we'll see because I've got quite a bit of other stuff going on this week as well. I might also start reading some of the books that I got at Yauk. This is one of them. It's Bunny. It's the biggest hardback, but I think the paperback's about the same size when you look at the pages specifically, not the cover. So I'm not sure how well I'll be able to deal with this with my hands, but we will see. And as I said, there are other ones as well. The main thing is just that I haven't read any of the books that I got at Yauk unless you count a pre-order. So I do want to read those at some point. For anyone new here, I have issues with my hands. That's why I'm wearing compression gloves. I don't know what they are yet. The issues, I mean, it's not just my hands that I have issues with, but because it's reading, it requires my hands. Therefore, it's what's relevant, and I tend to mention it in every video because it is relevant in every video. I think that is actually all of them. All of the ones that are officially on my list for this month, which doesn't feel like a lot, but as I said, there's the reading vlog going on. So I feel like I can't really decide what to read when I don't know what I'll be reading then. If I end up reading a book that's part 1 of a series, then I'm going to want to continue on reading that series, probably. So that's it, really. How many is that? That's 1 audiobook, 2 sequels, and arguably up to 5 of this. But I'm hoping to read at least 3 books in that reading vlog. But we'll see when I come to it. It depends what colour it spins and how long the books that I find are. But I have basically cleared a week to do that. So that's it, really. I might end up reading all sorts of other stuff. I might end up reading We'll Prescribe You Another Cat. You know, it's not currently on my list, but that doesn't mean I won't read it. If you've got any reading plans, please let me know. Comments do actually really help the algorithm, so if you have anything to say, even if it's something mean technically, but I would rather you don't say anything mean, especially not to other people in my comment section, then I would love it if you do that. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to, please like and subscribe, and maybe you'll see me in the next one. Until then, bye.